Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Damon Hatfield. Joining me as always are Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Good to be back, Daemon.
And Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hello once again.
Let's talk some gaming hardware. The PS5 Pro, it's out now. It's fine. If you can afford it, your games will look a little bit better, but it is unquestionably the most powerful console on the market now. So, what will Xbox do to counter this situation? Well, for the time being, nothing, apparently. Even though we know they were at one point planning some sort of a mid-gen refresh for the Xbox Series X, they're apparently not planning anything right now. Latest quotes from Phil Spencer speaking to Rolling Stone. He says, "We don't need to do incremental hardware for our own benefit. Does a new device really give you a unique experience on screen in some way? It's less like the old days. Going from the original Xbox to 360, that was standard definition to high definition. Now it's harder to show the benefits. To reach new players, we need to be creative and adaptive of new business models, new devices, new ways of access. We're not going to grow the market with $1,000 consoles," which might be a little dig at Sony. The PS5 Pro starts at $700, but if you want a disk drive and a stand and 2 terabytes of storage, you are getting closer to $1,000 there. So this all brings me to my big question this week, Ryan. We know the Xbox Series X is being just trounced by the PS5 in sales. For every Xbox that's sold, about 2.5 PS5s are sold. So if Xbox doesn't plan something to give the platform a shot in the arm right now with some sort of a pro model or mid-gen refresh, do you think Xbox should just fast track the actual next-gen Xbox and try to get it out onto market much earlier than Sony could with PlayStation 6?
I think there's a really, really good chance that exactly that happens. I mean, if you look, the Xbox 360 generation was 8 years long. The Xbox One generation was 7 years long. Of course, the original Xbox was only 4 years, but that was more or less by design. They were just trying to get their foot in the door. They were losing money on literally every original Xbox that got sold. But yeah, I just don't see this generation lasting that long, meaning 7 or 8 years for Microsoft, because there's really no advantage for them to do that when, again, Sony's put the PS5 Pro out. Sony's going to be probably on a more traditional timeline for the time being. And Microsoft is embracing this strategy of just putting their games everywhere on whatever device. And sure, that can include PlayStation 5s in some cases and Nintendo Switch, but it also includes their own devices, right? So they're going to, they're letting you, actually, as of today when we're recording, they're starting to let you stream your own games to from the cloud to mobile devices, and they're going to expand that next year to stream them to actual consoles as well, if you want to do it that way. And it just seems like with the handheld that's now fully publicly acknowledged by Phil Spencer, very transparently, they're going to be doing a handheld device. So they are embracing this sort of smartphone, or really even more PC-like. Granted, they've been going PC-like for a while, but the strategy on the hardware side really does seem to be more of that PC type, like just whatever range. We're just going to have a range of devices that our games are going to be playable on, from the lower end, which, you know, today is a Series S, to a higher end, but stuff in between, like a handheld. And I think absolutely, we're probably not going to be waiting until 2028 for the next generation Xbox. I think it could very well come a couple of years sooner than that. And now, that is to say as well that they have been probably proven, or I think history will not really frown upon them for not doing a mid-gen refresh here, because with the Xbox One X, there was a real consumer benefit to offering that $500 mid-gen console refresh there, which is 4K. Like, we didn't have 4K on the Xbox One or on the PS4, and Microsoft brought a more powerful device a year later than the PS4 Pro, but they brought native 4K, whereas the PS4 Pro largely, in a lot of cases, checkerboarded it and didn't have as much power. So, you know, they were also proven right years ago by not doing VR. Like, that has not really worked out for Sony, and Xbox had said with the One X announcement back in, gosh, what was that, 2016 maybe, where they said, yeah, we're the One X, it's powerful enough to do VR, and then we never heard a peep about that again. and that staying out of that piece of hardware has proven to be the right decision. And it seems like, based on the reception to the PS5 Pro so far in terms of sales and what it's actually doing for games, that I don't think anybody's really going to be too up in arms if Microsoft doesn't do a Series X Pro. But that said, I don't think we're going to go another 4 years without a flagship Microsoft console, because if the handheld is 2-3 years out, that's not going to be top end performance. But yeah, I think it's going to be sooner than 4 years for a new proper next gen Xbox.
Well, the lifespans of both the PlayStation and Xbox platforms have been coupled for the past 2 generations. This one and the last one, I think both consoles launched within a week of each other over both generations. But the 360 launched a full year ahead of the PlayStation 3. And I think that head start, along with some stumbles Sony made with the PS3 like price, I think that was a huge benefit. It really sort of they're able to get their foot in the door, and they kicked off that generation with a real advantage. Do you think we could possibly see that happen again next time with the next gen?
Yeah, I mean, it, like you said, it couldn't have worked out better for Microsoft when they were able to achieve that with a 360, and that was granted, the circumstances there were, as you said, Sony kind of had about the worst case scenario in terms of the price of the machine, and Microsoft had about the best case of the scenario, in that they not only had a cheaper piece of hardware, but they really got developers on board, because it was an x86 based thing versus the PS3 that was a more complicated cell processor. But more importantly, at the end of the day, the 360 just had amazing games right from the jump. So you had this whole incredible library of next-gen games before the PS3 ever hit the market. And we're not really in a world where that's going to be the case anymore, probably, where compatibility across a number of devices is such an important thing, because games cost so much to make, and you've got to be able to sell to as big of an installed base as you can. But that said, yeah, it's just seems likely that Microsoft hasn't been able to win by staying in lockstep with Sony, and so, granted, even though it was particular circumstances last time when it benefited them so much on the 360, and maybe wouldn't quite replicate that same scenario now, it still probably doesn't make sense for Microsoft to just stay in lockstep hardware-wise with Sony and eke them out by a teraflop or so. It probably makes more sense for them to just forge their own path, have a new box here in 2, maybe 3 years, and see if they can really jump out ahead of PlayStation 6, even knowing that PS6 would come a couple of years later and then leapfrog them. But the status quo is what I'm trying to say is the status quo has not really been serving Microsoft in the hardware space, and so it does make a lot of sense, particularly with them not doing a mid-gen refresh here, to just start the next gen earlier than we might have thought.
Well, Max, what do you think? PlayStation is sitting pretty today, has a very comfortable lead in sales over Xbox, but if Xbox were to sort of kickstart the next generation early, would that force Sony's hand?
I wouldn't see that happening so much. I guess Ryan's point about the 360 getting the jump on the PS3. I could see that happening maybe, but on the other hand, you could also have a situation like the Dreamcast where, depending on how you look at it, it was either late to the party or it jumped the gun. Having one of those sort of this console coming out in the middle of generations, and again, things were much more generational back then. Nowadays, we're sort of seeing this odd blurring of the lines between pieces of hardware. If Microsoft came out with a brand new shiny box that was sort of neither here nor there, wasn't quite a mid-gen refresh, and wasn't quite a properly upgraded new piece of hardware, I could just see it kind of falling to the wayside. Because again, even with looking at the naming conventions, going from the 1 to the 1X to the Series X with an apostrophe for the asterisk for the Series S, like it's a little bit confusing, and you can't blame them for really just kind of pulling back from that and just selling the idea of the Xbox ecosystem as a whole, which seems to be what they're really doing, to the point that I'm thinking maybe they're not really too concerned with hardware right now at all. I mean, obviously they're cooking up some kind of a handheld over there, but going back to Phil Spencer's initial statements here, the fact that they're not really looking at trying to throw money at the problem and develop some new hyper powerful console that is going to cost $1,000 or what have you. I don't think that's where the audience is right now. Looking at the trailer they put out for everything being, this is an Xbox. There's a whole generation of people out there who got into gaming playing on tablets and phones. And the idea of having to sell them a brand new $700, $400, $500 machine, however much it costs, just for playing games when they already have a device that can run games, that seems sort of like it's a separate conversation to have. And looking at this, if you're a parent and you've got a kid who wants to play video games and they already have a phone and a tablet and a laptop, why would you get them another thing? And Xbox is sort of meeting people halfway there. It's getting people who they already have the hardware in front of them, they just didn't know they could use it to play games, which I think is really smart. Meanwhile, you've got Sony coming out being like, hey, here's a $700 machine you probably don't need. Do you want it? Okay, that's cool. You can get it if you want it, because again, it's not really flying off shelves right now. Because again, they haven't even shown much that it makes it like a must-have item. They're not even really making it something that you are. I feel like even the most tech-centric people aren't really jumping out of their seats to go grab a PS5 Pro, and it looks cool, but it hasn't really. No games exist right now that are really properly showcasing what it can do. And again, it's like the 8K conversation. Like I think it was Callisto Protocol just dropped a patch that supports 8K resolution, which is great. Who has an 8K TV? Like it's so far ahead of the curve that it's a non-issue. And again, the big problem we're having right now in the games industry is the ballooning cost of AAA development, to the point where what is the PS6 going to do? What is the Xbox Series XX, whatever you want to call it? What is the next generation going to bring to the table that the current one can't do right now? Because I feel like right now the issue is not so much a lack of hardware support. I think Microsoft was very smart in making such a powerful machine with the Series X, but also, thinking that maybe not everyone's as driven by that sort of wanting that high-tech thing, that it also makes sense to have a sort of budget option with the Series S. And I think they're playing both sides of the field there, but then they're going after an entire other audience by saying, hey, that thing you already own, that's an Xbox. So, yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see what it looks like if they get a jump on the next console generation, but I just have a sneaking suspicion we're moving away from that entirely. And just this week, we saw both companies are pushing cloud streaming even more than ever on whatever device you want to stream it on, which is cool. And again, I love having a shiny brand new console to open up on Christmas morning as much as the next little kid. But like, it's like if you can save $700 or $500, whatever, like that's also appealing too. That's fun as well, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is playing the games.
What do you think? I know this is sort of like what's behind Xbox's everything is an Xbox campaign. But their next gen hardware, are they able to get it? Like, can it be more powerful yet cheaper than the PS5 Pro?
Yeah, Daemon, I think there's reason to wonder about that. I mean, I think I've said on this very show that the price floor for the proper next generation consoles, and whenever and whatever form they may take, is probably $700 because of where the PS5 Pro is at. And will component costs come down? Sure, but the next generation of consoles are going to be more powerful than the PS5 Pro. So the costs will come down, but the power requirement goes up. And so, yeah, that's where I think the handheld is going to come in to a degree for Microsoft, and another Series S-like device, a lower, entry-level device. I mean, maybe the Series X one day, maybe that's going to become the baseline. It'll effectively replace the Series S. Maybe that's how it's going to go. Maybe there'll be a form factor shift on that, just a visual refresh, and they'll obviously drop the price way down as the component costs for that come down. I don't know, but yeah, we're still absolutely going to be paying a massive premium for the proper, full-blown next-gen console experience. But to Max's point, yeah, I think he's dead on there, talking about how there's all these untapped audiences via the phones, which granted, the phones are $1,000. So it's not like they're cheap, but they're buying those. Like, they're buying those for everyday life. And then, oh yeah, right, we can game on those, whether it's through the cloud or through a native thing or what. So it's the economics of the games industry are just getting more complicated, I guess. And I'm glad I'm not one of the people at Microsoft or Sony trying to figure it out, because I don't know if either one of them necessarily has the ultimate solution. If anything, Nintendo might be the one with the solution, because they're just not chasing the dragon on the horsepower, and they're keeping their prices relatively down. And I mean, we'll see where the Switch 2 lands price wise, but they're on a record generation right now, and then we'll see what happens with Switch 2. But yeah, it's a more complicated world than ever, which in our line of work is fun. At least, it is fun to talk about this stuff and cover this stuff. But yeah, as for predicting the future, it is not an easy thing to do in this line of work.
Well, speaking of Nintendo, they are the winner of last week's poll. We asked, which console platform are you most excited about going into 2025? Nintendo won with over 42% of the votes. Perhaps not surprising. They're the ones that have actual next-gen hardware announced to be coming out next year. That's obviously very exciting. New poll for you to vote on for next episode. Hey, what are you hunting for this Black Friday? A new TV. I know the Nintendo Switch OLED's going to be on sale. I believe PS5, there'll be some sort of a deal on those too. Maybe a VR headset, Lego sets. Make sure to vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live, and we'll share the results with you next episode. And that's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Ryan and Max. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in our LA studio to make this episode possible. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with the latest gaming hardware news. We'll see you then.